welcome to episode 9 of the Coronavirus Extraordinary episodes, where on this episode I have invited Jamie Taylor. He has 3 podcasts: the .NET Core podcast, the Waffling Taylors, Tabs and Spaces podcast, which I have no idea how he manages to cope with all 3 of those because, I find it very difficult with just one. But he was a very interesting person to speak to. I'm sure you're going to really enjoy the conversation. Have a listen. So welcome to Coronavirus Extraordinary episode 9 of Light on Leeds podcast. Today we've got Jamie Taylor who has remoted in to speak to me. Hello, Jamie.
Hi, Hazel. How are you? I'm
very well, thank you. Jamie, can you tell me a little bit about what it is that you're up to in Leeds?
Yeah, sure. Well, first thing I want to say is first-time caller, long-time listener.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the podcast. I like to know what's happening in the sort of Leeds area, and I can't remember how I found the show. It just sort of appeared one day in one of my searches. I was like, oh, cool. Some extra things about awesome people in Leeds. Let's check this out. And I've been hooked ever since, if I'm completely honest.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit about me, I guess, is I'm in the process of creating and producing and running 3 podcasts of my own, as well as full-time sort of running my own business, which is a heady mixture of things.
Yeah, I can imagine. I find it difficult with one podcast. I can't even imagine what it's like managing 3.
Oh, it's not easy. I'll tell you that much. To be fair, 2 of them are just me and my friends sort of sitting around talking nonsense. And the third one is more of a professional one. I'll get into what they are in a moment. But that one requires all of my energy, if I'm completely honest, because there's a lot of, as you know from recording, Light on Leeds, it's a lot of effort goes on behind the scenes with like pre-production, arranging interviews, finding time to sit down with people, the actual production of the show, the editing, all the post-production, and then actually getting it out there to people and advertising it and stuff. So that's the one I pour most of my energy into, but it's been quite interesting and loads of fun. One of my friends once described me as a serial podcast creator. And he said, you clearly want to get to the Apple Podcasts top 100 just simply by creating that many podcasts that they have to let you in, right?
You've got to choose one of them.
Yeah, right. That's it, right? Oh, dear. But yeah, I'm a full-time, like normal, outside of podcasting, I'm a computer programmer. I work with a technology called .NET, which is some Microsoft programming technology that we don't really need to go into. And I'm not actually from Leeds, so knowing that there's other people out there talking about what's great about Leeds and what's going on in Leeds is really helpful to me, because then I get to try out all these cool new places,
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm not originally from Leeds, but I feel like the city's just adopted me. Yeah. So where are you from originally?
So I'm actually from Hull, which when I tell people, they usually say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I actually really like Hull. I think that the City of Culture thing did a lot for it.
Yeah, it did. There was personal opinion, right? So this is not the opinion of Light on Leeds or Hazel in any way, but my personal opinion was that it was badly managed.
Right.
And that was just because, I go back every month or so, every couple of weeks, every month or so to see family and friends and stuff. And for the longest time, right, like within maybe the first month of the City of Culture year, you couldn't get anywhere in the city centre because they decided to repave the entire city centre all at once. Oh. And a whole bunch of stores closed because no one could get into the stores or get around the city. It was
that's a real
ridiculous.
Shame.
Yeah. But it was good, though, because once they'd sorted that out, there was, loads of people coming over and finding out what Hull is all about and the kinds of things that are out there. Like there's a place called The Deep, which is like it's like an aquarium.
Yeah, I love that place. Yeah,
it's submerged. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place, yeah. And there's quite a few nice restaurants and pubs and things opening up in Hull all the time.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Well, unfortunately, not so much right now.
No.
But yeah. There's some really nice areas in Hull where it's like I always used to call it student country. So I went to university in Hull as well, and I used to walk up and down. There's a street called Newland Avenue and a street called Princess Avenue or Princess Avenue, and those are always full of students and nice little cafes and bars that you can check out. That's always loads of fun.
So how did you end up in Leeds then?
Oh, right, yeah. So that was, I was working in Hull as a programmer for a almost like research and development. And then I got told, hey, there's this really exciting opportunity in Leeds. And they gave me all this recruiter or whatever gave me all the information. And I sort of mulled on it for a while, deliberating, should I move? Should I not? And I said, you know what, I'll go for the interview. And if I like the look of the place, if I like where it's located and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, I'll check that out. And this was back in, 2015, I think. Mm-hmm. And that was for a company that was working out in Crossgates.
All right, yeah.
And I went for the interview and absolutely loved the area and really got on with the people that I was chatting with, and they let me sort of sit down with some of the people who were working there at the time, and yeah, I got on with everyone. So I was like, yep, I'll take the job and I'll move, and it'll have to be about a month's time or whatever. And yeah, that first job I think really set me up. I've got some really close friends from that one particular job, and we actually have a Slack group where we all just sort of catch up with each other every now and again. Because we kind of bonded over, there's a ridiculously horrible card game called Cards Against Humanity, and we all sort of bonded over that. So we're like, it's the Cards Against Humanity group or something like that. We just all sort of get together and play that every now and again and just sort of chew the fat sort of thing.
Oh, that's nice that you could stay in touch with the people that you first met. That's great.
Mm.
And so, of your 3 podcasts, I'm imagining the one that you said is you chatting is the Waffling Tailors.
Yeah. So, Waffling Tailors is essentially me and my brother and a few of our friends, and recently some video game producers and developers and some legends in the industry from like the 80s and 90s. We just sort of sit around and talk nonsense about video games. That's my elevator pitch for it. In fact, a few hours ago, we wrapped recording on an episode that's all about. There's a game came out past 2 or 3 weeks, which is a remake of a game from the 90s called Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, we ended up talking for 3.5 hours about that game. And it just went from strength to strength and silliness to silliness. We ended up, like the end of the recording, which probably won't get released, the end snippet, was just myself, my brother, and our friend Lulu just all making silly noises like at each other for 5 or 10 minutes. Because why not, right?
Yeah, it's your podcast. You can do what you like.
Exactly, right, exactly. But it helps with like sound checks and making sure the sound levels are right, or at least that's my excuse for making silly noises.
And so I can imagine that's quite popular because, I mean, especially at the moment, I imagine that video games are huge.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We actually travelled down to London in, I want to say, October, November, towards the end of last year. And we went to a big event called EGX, which is the European Gamers Expo, which is essentially just 5 days of, here's loads of video games. Like they fill out an entire 2 or 3 conference room areas at the XL in London. Yeah. They fill out like 2 or 3 rooms, and it's maybe 4 or 5 miles of walking backwards and forwards of all of these different companies with all their different games. And we went to that and spent 4 or 5 days just walking up and down and playing loads of games. There were hundreds of people there. Yeah. And we met up with a few of our friends who also make podcasts. So we met up with the folks behind the Arcade Attack podcast, so they're pretty awesome. And we also met, whilst we were there, we met a guy called Stu Cambridge, who worked on the original Cannon fodder back in the early 90s, which was an amazing experience.
Great for you to meet him.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we've since had him on the show as well. We were just talking like the older games, what he's working on now. And because I'm a developer, I asked him a whole bunch of questions about what it's like to make games now versus back in the 90s. Oh, yeah. And just like it's a completely different industry. Like back in the 90s, you would have maybe 2 or 3 people working in a bedroom and they ship a video game and it's done. Whereas now there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of developers, maybe 1,000 artists, and it has $1 billion budget. Wow. And, there is a very strict deadline. Whereas back in the day, it'll be done when it's done. Yeah. And, it'll just go out when it's ready sort of thing.
A little bit more sort of organic a process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very much a business now these days, but that and the technology that we have too. So like I'm sitting here in front of my laptop which is a relatively powerful laptop, but it's really like it is tiny. It's not as thin as like a MacBook Air, but it's very, very tiny, very, very thin. Whereas the machines that they were working on in the mid-90s, I mean, I can't even. It's like a pocket calculator would be more powerful than it. You know what I mean? So just that wonderful change in technology. It's amazing to hear about that.
And do you think that sort of informs a lot of? Does it help? Does it sort of knock on into creative processes? Then would you say?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Like I say, as a developer myself, if I give myself a bunch of restrictions and say that I can only create an application that does this particular thing, or let's say I'm using a programming language or a programming framework that is very restricted. I can only use this much memory, or I can't use the internet or whatever. It makes me more appreciate the decisions that I'm making more, and it makes me write code that's smaller, tighter, more elegant. And the same thing could be said for working with the older hardware, like the Mega Drive, right? That could only have, I think, 1 megabyte of storage space on the cartridge, and that was the expensive cartridges. And you can only have 16 32 colors on screen at once, which sounds quite like a lot. But like if you're looking at, so like we're using an app here to communicate, and there's maybe 14 colors just used on the actual user interface of the app that we're using, or at least that I can see. So straight away you've used up all of your color palette, and then you mix into that, it's maybe an 8 megahertz processor. My phone has a 2 gigahertz processor, which is thousands of times faster. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, of course. And is there a completely different process then for, like you talk about your sort of big games that everybody are really into? Is there a difference between those sort of games and the ones that you sort of typically get on your mobile phone?
Oh yeah, definitely. So the bigger, more commercial games tend to use an off-the-shelf engine. So all computer programs, or rather all big video games, usually use something like Unreal or Unity or something like that. These are sort of like off-the-shelf products that you can buy and then you can tinker with to create your game. Whereas the smaller indie developers, we call them, or the people who work specifically on mobile phones, they can't use those engines because the engines require much more. We talk about horsepower when we talk about computers, so it requires more horsepower, faster CPUs, more memory, all that kind of thing. So you can't actually use those on the mobile phones. So then you've got to go write all of the code from the beginning, from the ground up. And the indie developers and the mobile developers seem to have a much, how do I put it, a much healthier time with generating their games. So the big companies, they tend to have a period of time called crunch, which is like, we have a deadline of February. So November, December, January, February is crunch time. So you've got all of your developers who probably don't even leave the office. They may not even go home because they're working almost around the clock to make sure it's ready to go and ready to ship in February. So that doesn't tend to happen in the mobile or indie space, if I'm honest.
Right. Okay. So that's quite a big difference. So you've got another podcast, the Net Core podcast. What's that one about?
Yeah, so the .NET Core podcast is all about. I mentioned earlier on about I use this programming tool called .NET. Now, my friend James describes programming with .NET as programming in easy mode, which kind of belittles a little bit about what that's about. So like, let's say I wanted to write a program that just sent a message over the internet and waited for a response, right? With .NET, I can do that in maybe 3 or 4 lines of code. If I wasn't using .NET and using a different system, that might be 20, 30 lines of code, might be hundreds of lines of code. The idea is that .NET wraps up a whole bunch of common things that you will do in programming. And so that then you can just pull those bits of code in. It's kind of similar to how I talked about the off-the-shelf engine. It's kind of like an off-the-shelf, almost like a shell of a program, and you just plug in your actual implementation details. Like we talk about the domain specifics. So let's say you owned a shop and you wanted to build a website for that shop. Well, .NET allows you to build the shell of the website within hours, and then it's up to the developer to then actually throw together all of the important bits about what makes your shop yours. And then you spend more time on that rather than actually working on, we talk about the plumbing of the code. So rather than figuring out how do we get this thing to actually send the web page down the wire to the person's browser, well, that's already taken care of. I just need to do the bit that makes your website look like it's yours, if that makes sense.
Okay. And sorry. So on this particular podcast, the .NET Core podcast, that's the kind of things that you're discussing.
Yeah, so back in around 2002, Microsoft released this thing called the .NET Framework, and it's been steadily evolving ever since. And then in around 2015, they announced that they were going to make a brand new version, restart from the very beginning, and undo all of the some of the slightly not so great design decisions that they'd made in order to make the whole system evolve. And that's when they came up with the idea of .NET Core. Now, .NET Core is different in that .NET Framework only runs on Windows, right? So if you wanted to write an app for a Mac, like a Mac laptop, like a MacBook Pro or something, it would not work if you used .NET. Whereas the boffins at Microsoft went away and they rewrote everything to do with .NET, coming up with this thing called .NET Core, which runs on Windows and Mac. And it runs on a thing called Linux, but we don't need to really go into that. That's essentially what an Android phone runs. Right. I have it running on my desktop PC because that's how I use my computer. But not Android, sorry, Linux. But anyway, I digress. So this is a tool framework system that allows you to build what we call cross-platform. So something that will run on Windows but also run on Mac OS. But they've also put in lots of effort into making it even more cross-platform. So the programs that you write in with .NET Core can run on a Raspberry Pi. I don't know whether you know of these. You know those credit card-sized computers?
Yes, I'm aware of all these terms, but not in great depth. But yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But they've also taken it one step further. And if you own a Samsung fridge, you can run the app on your fridge as well.
That's amazing.
It's amazing and also bonkers, if I'm completely honest.
What sort of apps would you want to be running on your fridge?
So you can run things like temperature sensors. So you will then be told if like the coils in the back break, or there are people who are investing in putting cameras inside of their fridges to watch for, say, when your cheese starts turning green and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
And you can get, the NFC technology that you have on your, presumably your credit or debit card, that sort of tap and pay sort of thing. You can get those same chips and put them on the packaging for food. And then you can have a scanner that sits inside of your fridge scanning everything. And you can have it embedded into the chips, the dates that the food goes off. And then your app will then just periodically once a day go, right, nothing's gone off. Right, your cheese is going to go off tomorrow. Right, you need to get some more milk because that's going to go off in 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it's brilliant, but also really kind of bonkers.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of where we're going with everything anyway, isn't it? I mean, especially during these times, during lockdown and everything, I've been thinking about just how lucky we are. I mean, not lucky, but lucky that it's happened at this particular point in time when we've all got this technology at our fingertips, being able to speak to your family and friends and, being able to watch performances as like a shared experience, and the whole Zoom meeting thing. And I think if it's going to happen at any point, I'm glad that it's happening now and not like maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you just think like we've got access to, if you're able to. Some people are not fortunate enough to pay for it, but say you've got Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, BBC iPlayer, you've got video games, books, the movies that you have on DVD or Blu-ray, TV shows you have on DVD and Blu-ray, you have TV. There's so much stuff that we can actually use now just to keep us entertained, right? If you look back 70 years ago during the Second World War, what did they have? They had the radio and they had books.
Yeah.
We are indeed very lucky for it to be. I'd rather it didn't happen, but like you said, but we're very lucky that it's happened now. Because now we've got so many different ways of communicating with each other. I've got a mobile phone in my pocket that is more powerful than almost any computer that I ever had in the 90s and into the early 2000s. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree. And just being able to, have access to all your music, all your photographs, it's just everything on it. Like I told Siri to set me a timer yesterday, and then, you sort of second guess yourself, and I thought, my God, if my child self when I was sort of 10 or 11 could see me doing that, it would just seem like the most futuristic thing in the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. I mean, I remember the late 90s, people were talking about, well, speech technology, it's not really going to work, and it isn't brilliant, and it's kind of flaky. And yeah, like you said, you can just say, hey, Siri, blah, 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 and it knows exactly what you mean.
Yeah, so, just amazing. And so do you also get guests onto your .NET Core podcast?
Yeah, so that's primarily a sort of interview show. So that's like I'll try and reach out to someone who does, say, machine learning, or as it's sometimes known, artificial intelligence, and I'll be like, right, what can I do in machine learning? Because I have no idea, right? Talk to me about machine learning and how we can do it with .NET. Or so the way that I know that you can run .NET Core on fridges is I interviewed a gentleman called oh dear, I'm completely blanking on his name. Oh my goodness, Jim Bennett. Sorry, that's
Jim
it.
Bennett, yeah.
Yep, I interviewed a gentleman called Jim Bennett who works for Microsoft, and he'd said, and he was the one who dropped the knowledge on me of, hey, you can run it on a Tizen fridge, which is Samsung's line of fridges with the Tizen logo on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Have you done this? And he was like, no, but only because I can't get Microsoft to actually pay to buy a fridge for me to wheel out on stage and run the code on. As soon as they do that, I'll be doing it.
Oh. So you get to meet all sorts of interesting people then and find out things that you didn't even know.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. The thing with programming that they kind of taught us at university was, we're not going to be able to teach you everything. And the entire industry changes on an almost hourly basis.
Yeah.
And so they tried to set us up for like lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And so you're always going to meet someone who, even if they did exactly the same work as you for 15 years, they've done it in some different way that you can then take and adapt and bring to your own programming sort of discipline. And yeah, I love talking to people about how they're building their apps and the technologies that they're using, and maybe not even the technologies. Maybe it's just some esoteric thing within the programming language itself that you could just do slightly differently, and it yields this huge result in maybe the amount of time it takes to run the program, or maybe it uses less power, or because that's one thing that we don't usually talk about is the actual power usage of an application, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to write applications these days that are very green, right? So I'll do a little bit of experimentation to find, okay, how much power does this code that I've written draw, and how hot does it make my computer? Okay, brilliant. Now, can I rewrite it to make it cooler or to make it use less power? Because my code's going to go live on some server in some data center somewhere, and I'm not paying for that power.
Yeah.
But it's having this knock-on effect on the environment because my code is there, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would never have thought of that sort of aspect of it. And so you have a third podcast called Tabs and Spaces.
Yeah. So the third podcast is myself, my friend James, and my friend Zach, and it is essentially, it's just us sitting around as if we're in a pub, just discussing something to do with either technology or the business of software development, or anything related to that sort of whole industry, right? And we just sit around and we talk. We've had an episode all on imposter syndrome, which is where you think that you shouldn't be in the job that you are in, because you compare yourself to everyone else and you feel like you're not as good as everyone else. But the thinking behind that is, if you are in that situation, you are already as good as them. You're just doubting yourself, but by doubting yourself, you're proving that you're as good as them, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting topic. And yeah, we just sit around for an hour or two and just talk nonsense about the business that we're in. And then I hand that off to my brother, who then edits it all together, and we get a podcast episode out of it, which is amazing. And I've actually been told by Zach that he sent a link to his dad, who isn't a programmer, and he's just like a businessman. He runs a number of pubs over in Australia, I believe.
Right.
And he'd said, just check this out, Dad. This is a new project I'm working on. I don't expect you to understand what we're talking about, but, I'd like you to, because he's quite proud, he wants to show his dad what he's doing. And his dad has said, when's the next episode coming out? Because and it's not because it's us, it's because of the subject matter. It's really quite interesting to him how it's sort of like seeing how the other side live, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So how do you manage with all three of them? Do you sort of share the work with other people?
Yeah, so the sort of day-to-day arranging of everything is it's all done via Google Drive. So we all have, I have like 15 folders and inside of each one there's different episode plans for different shows and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is I'll share those episode plans out to whoever is going to be on whatever show. And then we sort of collaborate on that and sort of expand on the ideas that we're going to talk about. Yeah. And then we'll organize everything and I think we use a software, an app very similar to the one that you use for Light on Leads, where everybody sort of connects and I just hit record and it starts recording. And then when that's done, that's effectively my job is done. I hand that off to my brother, who is an audio editor, and he just I pay him to do that. So I just here's some audio editing, and he'll come back 2 hours later with, there you go, done. What's next? And I'm
excellent.
Right, I better go record something else then, haven't I?
And so, before all this happened, had you always used this system, or did you ever actually get together, or are you not sort of geographically near each other?
So my brother lives back in Hull, so he's about 40 miles away. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, it's not so easy to get together. But we do, when I go over and visit, obviously I can't now, but when I do go over and visit, we have a number of hardware recorders and different microphones that we use, so we can actually record in the same place. So rather than using a computer, we've got a box, a little device about the size of your hand called a H6, and we plug all the microphones into that, we hit record, and it just does it for us. He then gets all the audio off of that and does the editing. So that one we can do remotely altogether. The tabs and spaces is entirely remote at the moment because Zach lives kind of in the centre of England, kind of in that sort of Midlandsy Nottingham area. Yeah. And James lives over in Wales. So it's kind of difficult getting us together on a sort of weekly or monthly basis, but we try. And then the .NET Go one, because I'm interviewing people from all over the world. I'm interviewing people in the States, people in the UK, people over in India, and over in the Far East. It's easier just to do it entirely remotely. I don't think I can get away with putting it down as a business expense. I've got to fly over here to interview someone. That's
unfortunate. And so the ones with your brother, have you ever do you notice any difference between the ones that you do remotely with him and the ones that you both do with each other in the room together?
Oh, most definitely. It's much easier to sort of read the other person when you're sitting with them.
Yeah, I agree.
And we can do things that are a little bit more, we use the term live to tape, which I think comes from radio, where if we're sitting in front of each other or in the same room, because you can see the other person, you can see whether they are going to say something or not, and you can usually feel from what they're saying what the next topic is going to be. Mm-hmm. So those episodes, we usually just put out with almost no editing on them. Yeah. But when we're doing them remotely, we've each got a webcam. So I've got I think it's a Logitech something or other. It's actually sat behind the computer that I'm using to talk to you with. And he's got this really fancy schmancy big DSLR camera that he's paid like £500 for. Yeah. And, a few of our friends all have webcams. And that way we can look into the webcam or look at the screen and see whether the next person's going to talk. Because what we all do is when we're not talking, we sit back. Yeah. And then if you want to talk next, you kind of lean forward a bit, and then when the current person who's talking stops, it's that person's chance to sort of jump in. So much easier than doing it without a video. But some people don't like the video, so we sometimes do it without video.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love the way that you've come up with sort of a little framework to be able to tell who's up next and who's talking next. Mm-hmm. Because I've definitely noticed the difference. I hadn't done any remotely recorded episodes until the lockdown, and it became necessary because it's just really lovely to meet people in real life. But yeah, I think it's working okay. I'm quite happy with everything. And again, it's just great that I wouldn't have even known about any of this technology unless I hadn't been sort of forced to look at other ways to carry on.
Yeah, definitely. The same here. Like I said, we especially with the Waffling Tailors, we tried to time recording the episodes around when I could go over and visit. Yeah. And so we would do everything that way. And then when this whole unfortunateness happened, I've had to go away and look into all these different technologies, and luckily I was able to tell my brother, look, just spend half a day. I don't mind paying you for it. Spend half a day and just investigate them all, and come back to me with how much each one costs and what they all support and the different ways they all work, and we'll figure it out from there. And credit to him, he spent a couple of days doing it. Actually, he did a really deep dive, and lots of she was put in several different bits in him over, and I've read it all. Which one? And he said, "What do you mean? I can't make that decision." I said, "Look, you know that, you know the information, right? Which one do you think works best?" "Well, I think it's this one." "Okay," so we went with that one.
Oh, excellent! That's really good. Have you had to change much about your sort of day-to-day living due to lockdown, or did you already do quite a lot of work from home?
So it's a weird one. So because I'm a contractor, right? I'm in full control of my sort of working hours and my working conditions, I guess is the right word. But a lot of my clients did request, can you at least come in once a week so we can have a catch-up meeting and you can show us the work you've been doing? So I was like, yeah, sure. So I would commute over to Manchester and York and places like that 2 or 3 times a week, just to different clients, just to see, sort of show my face and get to know everyone and that kind of thing. I don't have to, but I choose to, sort of thing. Yeah. And all of that has gone completely by the wayside. I did have an office at one point, like a remote office, because otherwise, you wake up, you fall out of bed, you go downstairs and sit in front of the computer, you ain't going to get no work done.
Yeah.
Because it's your space, But I did have a remote office for a while, but I've had to sort of hand that back and cancel that contract because obviously I can't get there.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And do you have any sort of hints and tips for anybody at home about anything that you come across that you found particularly useful?
Yeah. I mean, just before this whole thing happened, or rather just before the lockdown measures were announced, a whole bunch of developers got together and started writing all sorts of hints and tips about how to sort of continue being, I don't like to use the word productive. I prefer to use the word effective. Yeah. Because especially in computer programming, productivity seems to be more about getting as many tasks done as possible. But the problem is that task may not actually be useful. Yeah. What you want to be is effective to the company that you're working for or with. So some of the wonderful bits of advice I've read so far, and I've been working remote for a while, is things like, we all used to have commutes. So kind of in a roundabout way, if you feel like you still need the commute, then, as long as you're doing it safely, go out for a walk. Yeah. First thing you do, get out of bed, do whatever you do in the morning to get ready, get dressed into the clothes that you would have worn to the office anyway, and go for a walk, even if it's just to the end of the street and back. Because getting out of the house and just walking around has this kind of strange psychological effect and puts you into that sort of work mode, which can be really useful. And then take as many breaks as you need. Remember that, this is a global pandemic. So if you're not as effective as you used to be, you're still doing blooming brilliantly, because I don't want to say it, but, anyone can catch this and anyone can become ill. So you're doing brilliantly by staying alive, essentially,
Stay alive, staying in, yeah.
That's it. Stay alive, stay safe, and be careful. And then other things like if you live with other people or if you have family members or little ones, try and set aside some time and maybe a sign of some kind that says, whilst I'm in this room, and maybe if there's a light on outside or if I've got a sign on the door that says I'm working, try not to interrupt me as much as you would, because obviously the big temptation is, Dad's at home, I'll just go sit and talk with him. Yeah. Well, I get that, for you, this kind of is a little bit like a summer holiday, but for me, I'm still working. So maybe if we, it's not a case of whilst it's there, you can't interrupt me, but more a case of whilst it's there, maybe come in at about 10 o'clock if you need something, or come and get me at lunchtime. We'll all have lunch together, that kind of thing. And we've taken to every week or so. Yeah, every week on a Sunday, we go and sit in the back garden and have a picnic because, we're all together, we're all outside, we're all enjoying the sun, and we could just talk about whatever we want. And, that's kind of been useful for us.
That's lovely.
Yeah, and some people, they may not be living with other people, or maybe they'll be sharing a house. If everyone that you're with is interested in that, you can totally bring that up or something, or maybe have a games night or something where everyone gets together. You put your mobile phones on the other side of the room. You don't turn the TV on. Maybe have the radio on or someone's phone for music, and you all sit and do something together, whether that's playing a game, like a board game or a card game, or doing some colouring in, or, I mean, you could tell that I've got little ones around me, right? So some of my suggestions are going to be specific for
You've got some great tips, yeah.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, things like that. And don't forget to go exercise as well, right?
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people who commute into work, will be, right?
Yeah.
So you immediately lost half an hour of walking to and from the office. Regardless of whether you drive there or not, you still got to walk from your car to your desk, right?
Yeah.
So you've already lost half an hour of walking. So that's half an hour of exercise you're not doing. Mm-hmm. So go out and have a walk. Maybe at lunchtime, go for a walk around the park. As long as you're staying safe and you've got that, they recommend a 6 feet distance, then, you should be okay. I mean, I'm not a medical professional, so obviously please check with the medical professional, but that's what I've been doing. Every couple of days, go for a walk or, go for a run or something, because, I like to go running, but some people don't.
Yeah, I just think it's good for your mental health, isn't it? Just to get outside and to walk about. Yeah. And I think at the beginning, it all seemed a little bit anxious because you weren't really sure what you were supposed to be doing, or, worrying about how other people are taking notice or not of any sort of social distancing rules. But it does sort of feel like we've sort of kind of settled into it, really. And everybody does, in general, seem to be paying attention, which is great. Oh,
yeah, definitely.
And the better we're all acting through this period, the quicker we can all come out of it.
That's it. That's exactly it. The more people who observe the advice and the sort of rules that have been put into place, the quicker we can get back to normal life. It's not about stopping COVID-19 coronavirus. It's about flattening that curve.
Yeah.
So the best way that I found it explained was there was a video that Will Smith had produced.
Okay.
He's sitting talking with his family. He says, let's say the local hospital can take 40 people who have respiratory problems, right? Mm-hmm. Now let's say that they've already got 40 people, but 60 people get ill. What do they do with those extra 60 people?
Yeah.
And the whole idea is to reduce by flattening that curve, by observing. I don't like to use social distancing. I prefer physical distancing.
Yeah, because it makes it sound like you just having nothing to do with anybody else, doesn't it?
Exactly right. But by practicing physical distancing, you're reducing the amount of people that could potentially get it. You're stopping you from potentially getting it, which then potentially can reduce the number of horrendous decisions that medical staff have to make on, we can't heal you and there's no more beds in any other hospitals.
Yeah.
So maybe you should just go home and hope for the best. And you don't want that. Nobody wants that, right?
No, we don't. And do you think that there could be some sort of positive implications that could come out of all of this, like you just said about getting back to normal? I mean, I'm personally hoping that everything just doesn't just return to the way things that were before. I think there's quite a lot of lessons that can be learned from this sort of period of staying in self-reflection. Can you see any changes that you'd like to sort of see come out of all of this?
Oh, certainly. The biggest one for me is I would hope that people would have a greater appreciation for things like the NHS, the key workers, the people. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine. He works at a supermarket, and he was saying, I'm just a cleaner at a supermarket. And I said, no. You are providing a safe and healthy space for people to go in and get what they need from that supermarket. You are essentially saving people's lives, but in a slightly roundabout way. Yeah. You are a hero. It's that simple, And I think that I'd like to think that when we come out of the other side of this, we'll have, as a collective group of people, we'll have a greater appreciation for the work that medical caregivers give, regardless of whether that's NHS or private or whatever. The key workers who work in shops and stores and the emergency services. And I mean, I've still received post whilst this is happening, right?
Yes.
I've still gotten every package I've ordered from Amazon, every letter I've gotten from whoever's wanted to send me a letter. Mm-hmm. That is an essential service, right? That's a service that can't stop. So for me, I feel like a greater appreciation for those services. And I think I'd like to hope that people would be a little bit more respecting of everyone's sort of personal space. Yes,
yeah, let's hope so. I think there are lots of things that can be drawn out of this terrible situation. and I just hope that we don't just sort of snap back into everything being exactly the same.
Sure.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah, so let's hope so.
You've mentioned to me that you spent some time in Tokyo.
Yeah, well, I've only really spent about a day in Tokyo.
Oh, right, sorry, but in Japan in general.
Yeah. So, I love going to Japan. I prefer the south of Japan. So if you imagine the map of Japan in front of you, it's going to be difficult to describe in audio, right? Tokyo is kind of in the middle of the long island,
right?
That you're visualizing. I like to be as far south as possible because the life down there runs at a completely different speed, right?
Right.
And what I've always said to people is, if you've been to London and been to Piccadilly Circus, you've been to Tokyo. It's exactly the same. The only difference is people speak Japanese out there. That's it. That's the biggest difference, right? And you can do Tokyo in about a day and a half, and you've seen everything.
Right.
I managed to do it in a day just because I was like, oh, right, what's over here? Oh, what's over there? And, I had a big list of places I wanted to go see anyway, so I'd already sort of planned it out. But, the town city, I guess it's a city. The city that I really like to go to is called Hirado.
Right.
So that's Hirado. And the reason for that is because Hirado has these really strong ties to Western Europe. So there's a lot of history goes into it, but 1600s, a ship crashes there, and it's full of Dutch sailors and an Englishman who had piloted the ship. So the pilot of the ship was someone who would plot the map, plot the route out, and help the captain decide which way to go. And in Hirado there is a museum to that man.
Wow.
I want to say it's Richard Blackthorne. I've probably got that wrong because I'm mixing it. So if you've ever read or seen the TV show Shogun, which was produced in the 80s, that is essentially his life.
Oh, really?
Right? So yeah, it's based on. There's a lot of fiction in there, but it's basically his life. And so that's one of the things I really like about Hirado is it's got this really deep connection to sort of the Netherlands. I'm not from the Netherlands, but just that deep connection. And the people there are so different. Imagine the average day in London, right? There's that silly story that comes up every now and again on Facebook, Northerner shocks the entirety of London by saying hello to everyone, because, it's that everybody's busy, everybody's running around, right? Whereas Tokyo is very similar to that. But Hirado is very kind of similar to sort of Leeds, Manchester, that kind of Yorkshire area where life is still fast, but everyone's willing to take a moment to stop and have a chat with you or something. Yeah. And it's just the wonderful people, the great atmosphere. And I think the picture that I shared with you for the show notes is a picture of me on a ferry leaving Hirado to go to a very small island called Oshimamura, which means big island, but it's very small. It's 4 miles across. And in the background, you can see Hirado Castle. It's one of my favorite. I don't think many people can say this, but one of my favorite Japanese castles. It's a strange thing to say, but and they've recently had to close that because they're reopening it as a hotel. So you can go and stay in the castle and rent a room, which is really quite cool, I think.
So have you done quite a few trips to Japan then?
Yeah, a couple. This most recent trip was April last year, so around about this time last year, and I went with a whole bunch of family friends. And for the first few days, it was pretty cool because we were in that Hirado area. We've got loads of friends there who speak English, and they were doing the majority of the translation. And then we had to go back more closer towards Fukuoka and Nagasaki. And when we were there, it was right, Jamie, I want to order one of these things. You're going to have to come to the shop with me and talk to the person. And I'm like, okay, right, it's been a couple of years since I spoke Japanese, but I can give it a go. And we got out alive, is how I'll put it.
So where did you learn Japanese? Was that at university or?
It was, yeah. I studied Japanese at the same time as doing my computer programming degree at Hull University. Did it for about 4 years, but it was kind of one lesson a week for 13 weeks out of 26 weeks out of the year. So, it wasn't as deep as someone who's done a degree in Japanese, but it was good enough to be able to hold a conversation. At least I hope so.
So you're a great person to visit Japan with then.
That's what a lot of my friends have told me. One of my friend Lulu has said, when I do get married to my other half, we're going on honeymoon to Japan and you're coming with us. I was like, whoa, I didn't realize we were in that kind of a relationship. But she said, but that's so that then we can go to all of these places I've always wanted to go and you can get us in.
Oh, that's great. So I always ask my guests 3 questions. The first one being, what do you think is great about Leeds?
So I've tried to come up with something that other people that have been on the show haven't said, because there were people who were talking about like the canal that goes through the city, loads of wonderful places, like OK Comics, and things like that. And I spent a little bit of time, and I was going to say Sandco, but someone else has said Sandco, so I can't really copy off of them, can I? But there are a number of smaller places. So the biggest thing that shocked me when I first moved to Leeds was there's always something going on, right? And it's something. I don't mean that in any kind of bad way. I mean like places don't close and people are still around in the city doing things. They're getting together. They're going for a night out or whatever. So. Places like Hyde Park Picture House and Everyman are amazing.
Yes,
but as someone who is very interested in that weird connection between video games and Japanese language, I'd have to say there's a number of places that I love to go to whenever I'm in the city centre, and that's the Geek Retreat, which is kind of hidden away. It's kind of inside of how can I describe it? It's by the back of Debenhams. There's a little street, and down there's a Japanese restaurant on the left.
Yeah.
And Geek Retreat is on the right, but you have to go up some stairs once you're inside.
Right.
And that's for like board games and miniatures. And they've got a few video games there and things like that. The figurines, and they have a little cafe there. Well, they did when I last went in. And that's a wonderful place because you can just walk in, pick up a board game that they've got opened up, and you could just start playing with a bunch of friends if that's what you're into. Or they have comic books you can just sit and read. Or they have, supplies for... so my brother collects all of these card-based games, and they have the plastic sleeves that you can get for the cards, and they have dice towers and all sorts of stuff. So that's I think a good place to go. And then because I'm interested in sort of Japanese cuisine, there's a place called Fujihiro, which is... where is it? It's one of the 2 shopping centres, and I always get the wrong one.
Is it near the Marion Centre?
It is, yes. It's the Marion Centre, thank you. Because I always mix the Marion Centre up with the other one. Yeah, it is. I haven't been to a huge amount of Japanese restaurants outside of Japan, but of the ones I've been to, that has always been the most consistent with like the textures and flavours and experience of eating in Japan. So I have to say that's my favourite place to go to in Leeds. And I'm hoping that they're still going to be open when all of this nonsense is over.
Yeah, I think that's all of our hope. You know what I mean? That all the places that you used to visit, that they're still there standing.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that every business that has been able to survive this can then open back up and then take on all of their employees again. Yeah. Because otherwise, we're going to have a huge amount of unemployment. I don't want to scare anyone, but that could potentially be something that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And what would you say is something that is not so great about the city?
So this one I think is it's a tricky subject, but it's like the homelessness. Ever since I moved to Leeds, I started out in Crossgates and moved up to Headingley for a while, and now I'm just outside of the city. I'm over near where IKEA is. Yeah. And on those sort of outskirts of the city, it's not so bad. But when you get into the city centre, there's just this big problem. And I don't know what's going on because I'm not part of the council or the police services or the support services. But it seems like there's more and more homeless people almost with every passing month. And it saddens me to think that maybe there isn't the support system there or something, and that I think is something that's off-putting. When I've brought my brother over or when I've brought family over and I've met them at the train station, they've always been like, there's so many people who look like they're living rough, living on the streets. And I said, it's a big problem, and I think that can kind of put some people off if they see it. I know that there's a lot of people who can walk around and just almost like they're completely blind to it. They can see everything above eye level, but nothing below it, which is a real shame.
Yeah, it is a real shame. I mean, luckily we've got some, I mean, it seems ridiculous that you have to have these, but we've got some amazing charities in Leeds that are doing great work and going out there on the streets every night, making sure that everybody's, you know, safe and well, and the people who want to be rehomed, they help with that and give them a support system. But it just seems like, you know, when we're supposed to be like a developed country and sort of forward thinking, it seems crazy that we're having to rely on charities to do this work. But that's where we are.
Unfortunately so, yeah.
And would you be able to tell somebody who was a long-term resident of Leeds about a hidden gem that you think they may never have come across?
So I spent a lot of time thinking about this one, and I wanted to say somewhere like the is it a mansion that's in Roundhay Park?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody around here knows about Roundhay. Although I've also found that they don't pronounce it Roundhay, they say Roundy, which is, I mean, it's just the colloquialism, right? But I think the one thing that I'll point out, right, I like to go, when I first go somewhere, I like to go off the beaten path. I don't want to go where everybody else has gone, only because everybody else is there and they're all seeing what's there, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I like to do is I like to really look around and see what there is to see. And whilst it's not off the beaten path, if you walk up and down Boar Lane, but look slightly above eye height, there's loads of gargoyles and things hanging off the walls up there, and just that mixture of really sort of old architecture. I don't know how, because I'm not an architecture type person, but you can see like above the Griffin pub, there's a bunch of gargoyles and statuettes, things hanging off. And then across the street, you've got the big window that is Primark.
Yeah.
You know, with this ultra modern, massive photos of people and it's straight, sleek lines. And then you turn around and there's more along on your left hand side. There's more of the Trinity shopping centre, which is all new buildings. And then as you walk down, there's just a random church there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, there's all sorts of different, it's the different feel that it has. It feels like, to me, it feels like Leeds has sort of grown organically, and you can see the different buildings as you walk through the city centre. So like up on the head row, there's, I think it's another church, but like surrounding it, there's like the Apple shop and Sports Direct or whatever it is, you know, all these ultra modern buildings around it, and then just right in the middle there's this little courtyard and a church. It's really quite strange, and if I'm completely honest, I've seen that other places, and the other places I've seen that in places in like Western Europe, and strangely enough in Japan, right? You can walk down the street and you've got office building, temple.
Yeah.
And we're talking like old temple, and then office building, shop, temple. It's just weird. That's that similar layout. And I think it's just because all of these cities, regardless of where they are, have just sort of grown organically and slowly sort of migrated out. And I don't think you get that in places like America or, you know, the slightly younger countries, or the countries that don't have that long history of having the same buildings around for a long time. So I think that's something that I like to point out to people. And some of them, they've gone, oh yeah, I've never really noticed.
Yeah, there's always a case for looking up in Leeds, isn't there?
Yeah, always.
So as well, I always invite a Leeds-based band or artist to play a track, but you have chosen the track yourself this week. Can you tell me a little bit about it in the band?
Sure, yeah. So I chose Hang On There Boys by the Blind Dead McJones Band, and they are a Leeds-based band. And I know about them because 2015, 2016 time, my friend Howard came up to Leeds for a weekend in Leeds. He was like, I'm going to stay at a hotel, but let's do Leeds, you know, let's see what there is to see, you know, because I like to do that anyway, just sort of wander around and see what there is. And we ended up sort of looking our way into, so we did it purely by luck. Steven Seagal, who, you know, the action movie star from the 80s and 90s, he has a blues band, and he was playing at the O2 Academy. And we were just sort of sitting there having lunch, and he's looking on his phone for things to do. And he's like, Steven Seagal's playing. I saw him a number of years ago in Milton Keynes, and it was loads of fun. So I was like, shall we go? Yeah, all right. So he pulls up the details, orders 2 tickets, and we kind of get the last 2 tickets that were available or something. And we went into the O2 Academy, first time I'd ever been. And we went in, and the support act was a local Leeds band called the Blind Dead McJones Band, and it was just so much fun. Like there are very few musical acts that I've found that I can sort of watch and have fun watching them.
Yeah.
So like they've got this song called "Elephant on a Lead," and the lead singer Ben brought out a blow-up balloon of an elephant on a lead, because the whole point of the song is it's to do with like dragging your troubles around. It's like dragging around an elephant on a lead. Yeah. And there's a part where he pretends to shoot the balloon, and the drummer made a huge noise by hitting loads of the drums and the kick thing and all that kind of stuff. Made a huge noise, and it made us all. It was a wonderful time. It was loads of fun. So yeah, been a fan of theirs for a long time, and then I found out that they have like a mockumentary that they made themselves of the band.
Wow.
Yeah, and because like the whole conceit of the band is they are the band and Blind Dead McJones is the singer, but Blind Dead McJones never makes it to their live shows.
Right.
So like the first song they always play is "Hang On There, Boys," which is they're singing the song of all of the excuses that Blind Dead McJones has given for not being at the show yet. So it's like, I've just been held up in Indonesia, so you'll just have to wait. And it's just stupid things like that. It's wonderful. It's really silly. And I love that connection of stupid silliness and loads of fun and like that high energy music. If you can combine those three, you can effectively make a show,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's brilliant. And what will you be doing with the rest of your day today?
So today is going to be chilling out. I finished work earlier on today, really early on today, got up stupid early, and it's just going to be sitting in the garden and maybe playing some video games on my Nintendo Switch, or just sitting in the garden and just chilling. Because that's the most important thing, I think, in this time, is just find some time to just get your headspace. Just chill out, distance yourself from all of the worries that you have, try and put everything out of your mind and just be in nature. Let the sun shine in, chill out in the garden. I've seen a lot of people sunbathing in their own gardens, and yeah, totally. As long as you're doing it safely, totally.
Yeah, it's great to get out there and to get out and enjoy the sun. So I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you. It's been great to be here on the show, and I look forward to hearing more of the other people in Leeds who are creating things. And thank you ever so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming. It was great to talk to Jamie Taylor. I'm sure that you really enjoyed the conversation. As usual, there will be links in the podcast notes so that you can click straight through and get yourself liking and subscribing to his podcast. I loved hearing about his travels in Japan. That was fantastic. And I think it's always great when a guest has suggested the tune themselves, and then you get to hear a little bit of background about why they like that band and why they like that song. So you will hear shortly "Hang On There, Boys" by the Blind Dead McJones Band, which is a brilliant name. It's a great track, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Have a listen.
Hang on there, boys, I swear I'm on my way. I feel a slight delay out here in Adelaide. Hang on there, boys, or I swear I'll be there soon. I've got a ticket for a train that is leaving about noon. Hang on there, boys, although I hear you're doing just fine. But man, your vocal ain't half as good as mine. Hang on there, boys, I said all will be well. Look, George down his way, and it's just drops out of hell. Hang on there, boys, now let me put my foot to the floor. I might not make this gig, I'll be at that next one for sure. Hang on there, boys. 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 I really do apologize. I'm sorry to hear people have been accusing you of telling lies. Hang on there, boys. Are people saying that I don't exist? Just wait until I get there. I'll give them all a great big kiss. Hang on there, boys, but there's one thing I don't understand. If I wasn't real, wouldn't y'all just be called the band? Hang on there, boys, I said all will be well. If George's on his way, and he's just got time to hell. Hang on there, boys, now let me put my foot to the floor. I might not make this gig, now be at that next one for sure. Hang on there, boys. 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 You do not know what I go through. I just gotta walk the earth like Caine in Kung Fu. Hang on there, boys. Although I may have spoke too soon, I've slipped out the window and I could have sworn I'm on the moon. But keep going though, boys, as you have my permission. Now entertain the crowd with a guitar intermission. you a fact. Sometimes when you go someplace, it can be hard to get back. But don't worry, little boys, I said this is not the end. Our reunion's coming up, you know it's right around the bend. Hang on there, boys, I said all will be well. McJones on his way, and he's just got out of hell. Hang on there, boys, now let me put my foot to the floor. I'm not gonna make this gig up yet the next one for sure. Hang on there, boys. 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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.